You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott along with Paul Stone talking some college football. It is championship weekend. That's right, Friday and Saturday night with the Power Five and the mid-major, the Group of Five championship games as well. Paul, let's get right to it. In the first one, we'll go chronologically here on Friday night. The big one in Las Vegas, the rematch of one of the games of the year this year where Washington comes back and beats Oregon in Seattle, and now they'll go to Las Vegas here. Oregon is steamrolling down the stretch. Not so much for Washington. They barely win the Apple Cup, and now they are 6-0 on the season in one-score games. Oregon's strength of schedule, not nearly with some of the teams that are in contention for the college football playoff, but, man, they look good, and Bo Nix now is a slight favorite over Jaden Daniels for the Heisman Trophy. Oregon opened up around 7. It's up to 9.5 right now at BetRivers, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, this line, looking at it as I made my lines on the games, this was a game that I thought was going to be over 7 but less than 10. I actually made it 7.5, probably made it a little bit low. But, as you said, Oregon, since these teams played in Seattle about a month and a half ago, the last 6 games, these teams have really been on different trajectories, if you will. Although Washington obviously still undefeated at 12-0, the last 6 games, they've really sputtered at times. I mean, you look at the game after they defeated Oregon, Arizona State leads Washington 7-6 in Seattle with under 10 minutes to go. The next week, Washington struggles at Stanford, led by just 2 points late in that game before scoring a late touchdown. Washington and USC were tied at 42 through 3 quarters. Also, a depleted Utah squad actually led Washington 28-24 at the half in their matchup. And then 2 weeks ago, Washington played what I think was its most impressive game in the second half of the season. Went into Corvallis, beat a good Oregon State team 22-20. Obviously a very close game, but Washington seemed to be in control most of that game. And then this past Saturday in the Apple Cup, facing a struggling Washington State team that had lost 6 of its previous 7 games, Washington needs the 42-yard field goal on the game's final play to prevail 24-21. Meanwhile, you've got an Oregon team playing the same caliber of teams that really hadn't been challenged in the second half of the season. They've won those 6 games by an average of 26 points a game. In the only one of those games decided by less than 14 points, Oregon actually led USC 36-14 early in the fourth quarter before the Trojans scored a couple of so-called garbage touchdowns. So Oregon really playing well. Georgia, probably the best team in the nation right now, but Oregon very close in my opinion. They are 1 in 1A. Oregon's playing great football. I think they're going to make amends for that loss in Seattle. The winner of this game going to be in the college football playoff. I like Oregon by double digits over Washington.
Paul Stone, on your power ratings, is Michigan, Georgia, Oregon 1, 2, 3, or in what particular order? And how close is it?
I have Georgia. I know I have Georgia by a point over Oregon, and maybe have Michigan about a point behind those guys. So those are my top 3
there
teams.
You go.
Michigan definitely third behind Georgia and Oregon.
There you go. All right. Get extra value this football season with BetRivers Squares. Win up to $10,000 in bonus money. Bet $10 in same-game parlays on any game with the Squares icon to earn a square. Brought to you by our friends over at BetRivers. Let's go down to the Crescent City, uptown New Orleans. Tulane is -5.5 against SMU. And Tulane, we talked about them. Historical high win total this year, but it was a drop down in class for them in the conference. American last year was considerably tougher than CUSA, and then American this year basically graduated CUSA. And and they had so many scares, Paul. Tulsa, East Carolina, Memphis double-digit deficit on the road to come back. But they seemed to find a way to win them all. The only one they did not win is against Ole Miss, who had a 10-win season, and that was without their starting quarterback, Pratt. Quarterback depth is a key, again, for Tulane in this American Conference Championship game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this SMU team, and they lose Preston Stone for the season to a broken leg. And now in steps Kevin Jennings, a redshirt freshman, who originally in high school in 2021, he led Dallas South Oak Cliff, first of all, to the Class 5A Texas Division II state championship. But he was originally committed to FCS Missouri State and Bobby Petrino. SMU actually offered him, I think the week of the state championship game, his only FBS offer. So here he is at SMU, a redshirt freshman. He's appeared in a total of 10 games over the past 2 seasons, thrown a total of 46 career passes. When he's played, he's looked good, but it's been in mop-up duty against overmatched opponents. And this is certainly a different kind of game going up against Tulane with the American Athletic Conference championship on the line. So the jury's out on Kevin Jennings. I mean, he's an unknown quantity. I kind of take the position as a handicapper when we have an inexperienced quarterback like that. Until we see something, you have to expect that he's going to be confused some, that he's going to look like a guy who's never played. So I just think there's a decided advantage at quarterback for Tulane with Michael Pratt, who's a fourth-year starter. The guy started 43 games in his career there at Tulane, more than 9,300 passing yards, more than 1,200 rushing yards. He's accounted for 116 touchdowns passing and running. So they have a considerable advantage at the critical quarterback position. They're playing at home. I think they've got a little bit of a coaching advantage as well with Willie Fritz. And as you mentioned, this Tulane team, they are now 23-3 over the past 2 seasons. Not nearly, I shouldn't say not nearly, but not as strong as they were last year. Don't have Spears at running back. Lost a lot of good players in the linebacking core last year from that team as well. So not maybe quite on that same level, but they're still awfully good. That lone loss, as you mentioned this year in week 2 at home to Tulane, 37-20. Tulane plays their backup quarterback, Kai Horton. So Michael Pratt out that game, but it was still tied at 17 entering the fourth quarter. So I just like this Tulane team. A lot of factors in their corner, but mostly that quarterback advantage, which I put at about 5 points, the difference between Jennings and Stone. I like Tulane -7 over SMU.
Yeah, keep in mind last year against Central Florida's quarterback opted out. John Rice Plumlee was injured, and so they started their third-string quarterback, and it was going against a really good Tulane team on their home field with one arm tied behind your back. And then they decided to play Plumlee, to give him a go, and Plumlee rallied him and actually gave him the lead, but it was too little too late against that strong Tulane team that was going up and down the field. Very offensive game last year against Central Florida. Willie Fritz is the real deal. I'm not so sure he's going to pass up some of the offers that he'll have again this year, like he did for Georgia Tech last year. I will be surprised. Let's go to Charlotte, North Carolina, the ACC Championship. Oh, the committee. Florida State is undefeated. They finished off an undefeated season. Now they go play Louisville. Louisville now is not a top 10 win for Florida State as they get upset on home. Boy, that thing fell apart in the second half at home in Louisville against in-state rival Kentucky. Florida State 2.5 and 48.5, Paul.
Yeah, both these teams, Jimmy, Louisville and Florida State, very sound defensively, both rank in the top 30 nationally in total defense. Florida State giving up 323.7 yards per game to rank 20th, and Louisville giving up 328.2 yards per game to rank 26th in total defense. Also important to note that Louisville only allows 97 yards per game rushing to rank 10th nationally in rushing defense, only give up 3.3 yards per rush. I think with backup quarterback for Florida State, Tate Rodemaker playing his second game in relief of Jordan Travis, who's out for the season, I think the Seminoles might be a little bit more run-heavy, plus the Cardinals really good at pressuring the quarterback as well. You know, in Rodemaker's only career start, we only have a sample size of really one game at this level, although he had thrown about 90-something passes, I think, in the previous 4 seasons going into that game against Florida. But in his career start last week, first career start, I believe, last week against an extremely suspect, to put it kindly, Florida defense, the Seminoles only scored 24 points, only finished with 224 yards, only 3.9 yards per play against that Florida defense. To put it in perspective, Jimmy, in Florida's previous 5 games, and those games, 3 of these teams really good, but their previous 5 games against South Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas, LSU, and Missouri, the Gators allowed an average of 41.2 points per game, 528 yards per game. Every one of those, all 5 of those teams, including Arkansas, gained at least 465 total yards against Florida. Every one of those 5 teams gained more than twice the amount of yardage that the Seminoles gained last week against the Gators. Formula that I use projects only 125 plays in this game. I think, they're going to slow it down. I think both teams going to try to keep from committing the turnover, try to win it with sound defense. First team to 24 probably wins. I like the under 48.5 there in Charlotte on Saturday night. Also, right now, these things can change because as we record on Tuesday, the 28th, we are 4 days out from the game, but a 50-60% chance of rain in Charlotte as well on Saturday.
I like the under as well. There is no question about that. And as the schedule during this week is concentrated with so much fewer games, the chalk and the overs get played a little bit more. With the casual bettors, be zeroing in on the fewer games. So the 48.5 is a bigger number, and as long as that's there, I would get on it because maybe some sharp action might move it a little bit lower. I'm going to throw one in here too, Paul. I'm going to throw in Florida State minus 2.5. I like the Noles here. All the points were well taken that you made. I have to say this though, that was a little. Auburn was not the same team that played New Mexico State Saturday that played Alabama. Florida was not quite the same team either that played the hated Noles in their last game of the year. And if Billy Napier wanted, so I thought it was a good win for Florida State. I thought it was a team win. That they, followed 12-0 in the swamp. It's going crazy. I mean, that was a tough win. And I think they grew a little bit. I like Florida State minus a 2.5 in your under as well. I will say something about Billy Napier if they're going to keep him in Florida. Usually, non-conference schedule for Florida is Florida State and Renowinds, right? No. Florida State, Miami, and Central Florida non-conference last year, and throw in no Vanderbilt on the schedule with no divisional play. So a little early look at the Florida Gators schedule. That 5.5 might even be lower than it was this year. Let's go to your part of your part of the country, Arlington, Texas. Jerry Jones, and let's get to the Big 12 championship, the last one. Oklahoma State and Texas. How did Oklahoma State get into this thing, huh? I mean, how many games in a row was it 4 or 5 that they won as a betting underdog, including Bedlam? The tiebreaker was the key there. And how many points were they down against BYU? All of a sudden, this resurgent BYU giving Oklahoma and Oklahoma State all they could handle in the last 2 weeks. This line is shot up. It opened up, around 10.5, 11. It's up to 14.5 right now at BetRivers. Mike Gundy's Cowpokes, again now, 18 consecutive winning seasons for Mike Gundy in Stillwater, catching 14.5 against the Longhorns.
Yeah, I made Texas a 10.5-point favorite in this one, Jimmy. I probably was a little bit light. Probably should have made it about 11.5. But this number's now over 2 touchdowns. Frankly, I think it's gotten a little bit out of control. I think the market's suffering from a case of extreme recency bias, if you will, meaning it's focusing a little too heavily on last week's results. I think they're still seeing Texas scoring another touchdown against Texas Tech. They beat the Red Raiders last week 57-7. And then, as you mentioned, Oklahoma State survived BYU, won that game 40-34 in 2 overtimes, is more than a 2-touchdown favorite. But historically, Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy, they have fared well both as an underdog and against the Texas Longhorns. The Cowboys 21-9 against the spread as the betting underdog since the start of 2015. Also, in the last 5 meetings between these two schools, Texas and Oklahoma State's been the betting underdog 4 times. They've covered all 4 times. They've won 3 of those games outright. They weren't a double-digit underdog in any of those contests as they are here. but still, they play Texas well. This is the last time they might play them for many years. I think, we have to look at last week's results. We have to study those games carefully, but they don't supersede the other 11 games that these teams played prior to that game. And Texas struggled and sputtered a little bit, through the year after beating Alabama in week 2. 14.5 just seems like too many based on the number. I like Oklahoma State plus 14.5. Over Texas.
Because of the added teams, there wasn't the typical round robin. So this is the first time that these two teams will be playing in this game. So it's a little bit with the new additions to the Big 12. Oklahoma State plus a 14. I like how they bounced back, too, kind of flipped it on, too, down 18 at half. I mean, they pretty much dominated that second half. They had to come all the way back against BYU. So Oklahoma State plus the 14.5. All right, Paul, good luck. We good look to the bowl games moving forward. We'll be here for select bowls, both Paul Stone and Bruce Marshall, giving you all of those picks as well. Paul, we'll have a good championship weekend. Good luck to you, sir. And we'll see you next week for the bowl picks. This for Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.